We have mapped the surface of Mars better than our own ocean floor. We assume it is just miles of dead mud and cold rock. But in October of 2009, a mining crew in the Pacific proved that assumption wrong. They drilled into what they thought was the seabed, and the seabed started to bleed. This is the story of the day we found out the ocean floor isn't a grave, it's a stomach.
There's a silence on this planet that is older than life itself. It is not the quiet of an empty room. It is not the stillness of a forest at night. It is a physical weight, a crushing, heavy silence that exists only in the deepest trenches of the world's oceans. We like to think of the ocean as a place of movement. We think of crashing waves, migrating whales, and wild currents, but that is only the skin. Beneath the surface, down past the sunlight, past the midnight zone, and onto the deep ocean floor, the ocean is a grave. It is a place where things fall, settle, and are forgotten. Millions of years, a constant gentle rain has fallen into this darkness. Biologists call it marine snow. It is the leftovers of the living world above. Dead plankton, waste, decaying shark bodies, dust from space. It drifts down endlessly. It carpets the bottom of the world in a thick, gray sludge. We assume this sludge is just dirt. We assume the bottom of the ocean is a desert, a sleeping wasteland waiting for us to map it, claim it, and dig it up. We assume because the deep is dark, it is empty. We assume because it is silent, it is dead. But on October 29th of 2029, a survey team in the Pacific Ocean discovered that our assumptions were fatal. They did not find a grave. They found a stomach. And for 48 hours, humanity was not the explorer. We were the food. This is the story of the Aurora expedition. It is a story that you won't find in mining company reports. It is a story of physics, pressure, and the terrifying realization that on this planet, we are not the owners. We're just the tenants living in the attic, blissfully unaware of what has been growing in the basement for millions of years. To understand the horror of what happened, you first have to understand the geography of greed. The Clarion-Clipperton Zone is a massive crack in the Pacific seabed, stretching between Hawaii and Mexico. It is a flat plain sitting at 4,000 meters down. At this depth, the water pressure is like having an elephant stand on your thumb. It is enough to crush solid wood into stone. It is enough to destroy a human lung in the blink of an eye. But down there, in the crushing dark, the seabed is covered with billions of potato-sized rocks. To most people, they look like lumps of coal, but to the mining industry, they're batteries. These rocks are packed with nickel, cobalt, and copper, the raw materials needed to power the electric world. For decades, big companies have been itching to drop massive robots down there to scoop them up. Their story was simple. The deep ocean floor is a desert. There is barely any life to disturb. Therefore, stripping the floor is harmless. Enter the Aurora. She was a converted drill ship leased by a massive company we will simply call the Consortium. Her mission was a test. It wasn't military, it wasn't science, it was business. The goal was to send down a team of robotic drones, essentially underwater tanks the size of cars, to map a 20-square-mile sector of the seafloor known as Block 9. These machines were the eyes of the operation. The crew on the surface, engineers, geologists, and one lone marine biologist named Dr. Eris Thorne, sat in air-conditioned rooms, drinking coffee, watching screens that showed a world 4 miles beneath their feet. The crew of the Aurora felt safe. They were separated from the danger by 4 miles of water and long cables. They believed that the only risks were mechanical: a blown fuse, a snapped wire, a computer bug. They forgot the first rule of the deep ocean: distance is not safety. Distance is just a delay. The launch began at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. The Pacific was calm. The drones, named Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, were lowered through the opening in the center of the ship. They sank into the blue, then the dark blue, and finally into the absolute black. The fall to the bottom takes hours. As the drones sank, the pressure climbed higher and higher. By the time they touched down on the mud of Block 9, the pressure was over 8,000 pounds per square inch. On the surface, the mood was boring and professional. Dr. Thorne, the biologist, was only there because the law required it. He expected to see a few sea worms, maybe a fish or two. He viewed the deep ocean as interesting but empty. The first 24 hours were perfect. The live video showed the endless, flat sameness of the deep. Gray mud, black water, silence. The drones moved in a group, their bright lights carving tunnels through the eternal night. The maps began to appear on the screens. Block 9 was rich. The floor was covered in the valuable metal rocks. It was a gold mine. The executives watching from London and Tokyo were happy. They saw money. But Dr. Thorne saw something else. He was watching the side cameras. He noticed the mud. In the deep ocean, the mud usually looks like dust. It kicks up easily in clouds. But here, under the wheels of the drones, the mud seemed thick, sticky. It didn't cloud up, it tore. It clumped together like wet dough. He wrote a note in his log. Mud is unusually sticky, possible bacteria. He didn't know it yet, but he was looking at the first symptom of a massive infection. It started with the depth sensors. On the morning of the second day, Drone Alpha, the lead robot, began to report an error. Its computers said it was driving over flat ground, but the pressure sensors said its depth was changing. It was moving up and down, rising and falling by 3 or 4 meters in a slow rhythm. Imagine walking across a football field, but the ground beneath you is slowly heaving up and down, like a giant chest taking a breath. That is what the data showed. The lead engineer, a man named Saracen, dismissed it immediately. "Sensor error," he said. "The pressure makes the machines act weird. Reset it." They stopped the drone. They reset the sensors. They waited. The reading stayed the same. The floor of Block 9 was moving. Then came the heat. The water temperature at the bottom of this zone is always near freezing. It never changes. It has been that cold for millions of years. But beneath the wheels of Drone Alpha, the temperature suddenly jumped up by 10 degrees. "Is it a volcano?" someone asked. "Is there a vent down there?" Dr. Thorne looked at the charts. He said, "Impossible. The rock here is old and cold. There is no lava for 500 miles. This heat isn't coming from the Earth." The room went quiet. If the heat wasn't from the Earth, there was only one other source of heat in the universe: body heat. But to create that much heat in the freezing open ocean, the creature would have to be massive. It would have to be generating energy on an industrial scale. Director Vance, the mission commander, ordered the drones to keep moving. "Time is money," he said. "Ignore the ghost data. Get the samples." This was the moment of no return, the moment where human arrogance met nature's reality. We assume our machines are perfect. When they tell us something impossible, we blame the machine, not our understanding of the impossible. The drones pushed forward. The target was a dense cluster of the metal rocks about 300 meters ahead. On the sonar, it looked like a massive field of debris, perfect for mining. As the cameras brought the field into focus, the video didn't match the sonar. The metal rocks are usually random. They're jagged, bumpy lumps. They look like scattered potatoes. But the objects on the screen were smooth. They were black spheres, perfectly polished, and they were not scattered randomly. They were arranged in spirals, perfect geometric spirals stretching out as far as the lights could see. "That's not a rock," Thorne whispered. "Nature doesn't make perfect circles." Director Vance leaned in. "It's just a pattern in the sand, like ripples." "There are no currents down here strong enough to move rocks," Thorne argued. "Stop the drones. We need to look at this." For the first time, fear began to creep into the control room. It wasn't the fear of a monster. It was the fear of something wrong. The landscape looked almost right, but not quite. It was too organized, too clean. Vance ignored the biologist. "Grab a sample. Let's see what it's made of." Drone Alpha reached out with its robotic claw. The steel hand, strong enough to crush concrete, reached toward one of the black spheres. The camera zoomed in. The surface of the sphere seemed to be pulsing slightly, matching the slow breathing of the floor. The claw opened. It went down. The steel jaws closed around the sphere. They expected a crunch. They expected the sound of metal on stone. Instead, the sphere squashed. It didn't break. It burst. A cloud of thick, black liquid exploded from the object, instantly blocking the camera view. It wasn't dust. It was ink, or venom, or blood. "Back up," Jerrison yelled. "Get the drone back." As the drone reversed, the water cleared, and that's when they saw it. The sphere wasn't a rock. It was an egg, a sac, and inside the broken remains, thousands of glowing specks were swirling. But they weren't just floating, they were swarming. They attached themselves to the drone's camera lens. They glowed with a sickly pale green light, and then the video feed from Drone Alpha began to break up. Static, glitches. "We're losing the signal," the comms officer said. "Something is messing with the cable." Dr. Thorne stared at the screen, his face pale. "It's not interference," he said softly. "They're eating the cable." The truth hit Dr. Thorne like a physical blow. "Zoom out," he ordered. "Drone Beta, zoom out now." The second drone, sitting 50 meters behind the first, looked up. It lit up the seafloor where Alpha was struggling. The mud was gone. The gray dirt had pulled back, revealing what lay beneath. It wasn't rock. It was skin, a vast, pulsing, translucent skin that stretched for miles in all directions. The black spheres weren't rocks. They were organs. Eyes, eggs, stomachs. "We didn't land on a field," Thorne said, his voice shaking. "We landed on it." The entire 20-square-mile sector of Block 9 was a single organism. In biology, we know about creatures that work together, like the Portuguese man-of-war. It isn't one jellyfish, it's a colony of millions of tiny clones working together. Thorne realized with horror that they had found something similar, but on a geological scale. A creature that had grown flat, looking exactly like the ocean floor, waiting for millions of years for food to fall into its trap. And we had just parked a 10-ton tank on its skin. We had just broken one of its organs. The waking up was violent. The floor beneath Drone Alpha turned to liquid. The skin opened. It wasn't a mouth, it was a pore, a massive hole that opened wide in seconds.
Drone Alpha didn't have a chance. It tilted forward and was sucked down, not into water, but into the thick jelly beneath the crust. The camera captured one last image, the walls of the throat closing in, pulsing with that same body heat. Then the signal died. "Cut the cables," Vance screamed. "Get the other drones out." But the organism was faster. Drone Beta and Drone Gamma tried to drop their weights and float up, but the black spheres, the eggs, began to let go of the floor. They floated up, thousands of them, surrounding the remaining machines. They hit the drones. They didn't explode. They stuck. They melted. They released an acid that ate through the metal in seconds. On the surface, the computer screens turned red, hull broken, water coming in, signal lost. One by one, the screens went black. But the horror wasn't over. The connection between the surface and the deep was not completely cut off. The heavy steel cables were still attached to the ship's winches, and something was pulling back.
The Aurora was a huge ship. It was stable in a hurricane. But now, the ship groaned. The steel frame on the back, built to hold massive weight, began to bend. "The winch is stuck," the worker shouted over the radio. "The load, it's pulling us down." 4 miles below, the organism had grabbed the cables. It wasn't letting go. It was reeling them in. "Cut it!" Vance yelled. "Cut it now!" The crew used explosives to cut the cables. A thunderous crack echoed across the ocean as the steel wires whipped free, vanishing into the water, sinking toward the dark. The ship jumped upward, freed from the weight. But then came the sound. It vibrated through the floor of the ship. It wasn't a noise you could hear with your ears. It was a noise you felt in your teeth. A low, deep hum. Dr. Thorne fell to his knees, holding his head. The sound triggered a deep panic in the human brain. Nausea, dread, the feeling of being hunted. "Look at the water," Saracen whispered. The sea around the Aurora began to boil, not with heat, but with gas. The movement on the bottom had released a massive pocket of frozen gas trapped in the mud. As the giant creature shifted, it cracked the seal. The frozen gas was turning into bubbles, racing towards the surface. When water fills with gas bubbles, it loses its strength. It can no longer hold up a ship. The Aurora began to sink, not from a leak, but because the water underneath it was turning into foam. The alarms screamed. The crew scrambled for the lifeboats. The ocean, which had been flat and blue, was now a white churning soup of toxic gas and terrified people. They were lucky. The gas burst didn't last long. The ship dropped 10 feet, water washing over the main deck, before the gas cleared and the ship floated again. But in that moment of chaos, as Dr. Thorne looked over the rail into the white water, he saw the glow. Tiny, pale green specks floating in the foam. The explosion of the eggs had sent debris shooting up to the surface, carried by the gas. The biological material from the bottom of the world had reached the top. It was right there, touching the ship, breathing the air. The Aurora limped back to port in Hawaii. The mission was canceled. The official report listed the incident as an equipment failure due to an earthquake. The loss of the drones was written off as a business expense. The crew signed papers promising never to speak of it or they would be sued. Block 9 was erased from future mining maps. It was marked as unstable ground. But the data remains. Dr. Thorne kept a copy of the hard drives. He studied the heat spikes. He studied the deep sound. And he came to a conclusion that keeps him awake at night. The organism wasn't just in Block 9. When he looked at the data from the surrounding areas, Block 10,
Block 11, the area's hundreds of miles away, he saw the same slow rhythm, the same breathing.
The creature we found isn't rare. It is the floor. It suggests that huge parts of the deep ocean floor are not dirt or rock. They are alive, a superorganism that covers thousands of miles, sleeping, waiting, eating the marine snow. It is the largest life form on Earth, and we have been driving ships over it, dragging nets across it, and dumping trash onto it for 100 years. We woke a small part of it up, and it reacted like a sleeping giant swatting a fly. But what happens when the rest of it wakes up? Deep-sea mining is set to become a trillion-dollar industry. We are planning to send hundreds of machines to strip mine the ocean floor. We are planning to peel back the skin of the world. We look at the ocean and see a resource. We see a mine. We convince ourselves that we are the masters of this planet because we have drawn maps of the land. But 70% of Earth is water, and 80% of that water is deep, crushing darkness.
Dr. Thorne's final note in the log reads simply, "We are not the top hunter. We are just the ones floating on the surface, safe only because the thing below us is still full from its last meal." The ocean is calm today. The waves break gently on the shore. But the next time you look at the horizon, ask yourself, is the water still because it is empty? Or is it still because it is waiting? I'm your host, and this has been Creatures Below Sea. Please subscribe to this channel. Thank you.